My name is Matt. Follow along as I turn Duracell, the legendary ocean racing sailboat, into a comfortable cruising home. Last week I asked that you would comment on the different designs that I had drawn up for the new stern for Duracell. It was amazing to see everybody's opinions about how which design they thought was the best, and I really appreciate all the interesting comments. I got a lot of great feedback, and I'm sorry I can't respond to all of it, but I learned a lot, and it was super fun. I'm briefly going to go over each design, tell you which one I decided to do. But first, I'd like to address a couple things that kept coming up in the comments. The first one being the opening transom door that turns into a swim step idea. I love that idea. I love the functionality, and it's very slick. I've spent enough time on boats to know that if it moves, it has to be maintained. And so one big goal of this project is to build a boat that is that requires the least amount of maintenance as possible. And so something like that would be difficult for me to build, and it would also require maintenance through the life of it. And so I'm not going to do that. Like I said, I don't think it's a bad idea. It's just not something that I want to continue to maintain through the life of the boat. The second thing is water coming up into the cockpit with an open transom like this. And in my experience, it's never been a problem. Ideally, this boat will go faster than the waves go. And if water does come in, it'll basically just get our feet wet. There will be a big gate at the back of the boat. And so if a person or a cat were to try and wash out the back of the boat, they would get caught at the gate at the back. And so, as far as the designs go, design number one was my first attempt at drawing the stern. I do like the look of the curved sides going down to the swim step, but it will be difficult to build those curved edges. I'm trying to keep things simple on myself. And it also has a small swim step compared to the other two. Number two is the most difficult to build. It has the cockpit sides pinch in towards the back. And the reason I did that was so that there would be kind of more bench, deck space to sit on back there. And I thought it would kind of look cool. But like I said, it would be the most difficult to build with all those curves. It also has a little bit bigger swim step, but not much bigger swim step than number one. Number three has the biggest swim step and is also the easiest to build. It's all flat surfaces, and the swim step is raised up just by like 2 inches, and so it is almost a foot wider than the other two are. None of this is set in stone, but that's the one I'm going to do is number three. Like I said, it's basically because it's the easiest to build and it provides the most space. We are considering putting a bench across the back over the very end of the cockpit, so you can just sit back there at sea, and then when we're at anchor, we could remove it so that it's easy to access the swim step, and then maybe turn it into a table or something like that. That's down the road. So for now, we're going to pursue number three, and thanks for watching. Last week, I was working on getting the stern of the boat ready for this big project. The goal of this project to expand the cockpit of the boat is so that we have lots of room to sail the boat, especially single-handed. We would like to have lots of bench space to have guests on board, and we'd also like to have a nice big swim step to make it easy to get on and off the boat. And a lot of space is lost in what is now the cockpit of the boat because of that sloped transom. Expanding the hull up and making the cockpit and the side decks longer will help achieve those goals. In this week's episode, the first part of this project is to make the very aft face, the bottom face of the transom, flat, perpendicular to the center line of the boat, and then also to start building the form which will make the hull shape. It is important for me to make this very accurate because I don't want to spend a lot of time fairing, as the least amount of time possible fairing as I can. And so the more accurate I am getting it done, the less fairing I have to do down the road. So that's what we're doing this week. So I began the project. I had to square off the very transom of the boat. To do this, I had to build a kind of mold that conforms to the shape of the hull on the bottom and then makes just that very aft face in one plane, a flat plane. I did this by taking a piece of melamine board, which I just screwed to the back of the boat, and then I used door skin and battens to form the mold on the underside of the boat. Then I taped it and waxed it up so that I could laminate to it without the fiberglass sticking to it. And then I coved the outboard bottom corner to create a nice radius in that bottom aft edge.
So it's a very picturesque fiberglassing scene.
So I'm doing the first lamination of the transom extension. I keep saying transom extension. I'm not making the boat longer. I'm making the stern bigger, basically. And so this first lamination is I'm making the actual very back plane of the boat, the most aft part of the plane, flat, straight. It used to be super curved, but for the design that we're going to do, I need to make it flat, and so that's what I'm working on tonight. I pushed as much thickened epoxy into the inboard corner as I could to make a radius for the fiberglass to adhere to. I thickened the epoxy with mostly colloidal silica and microlite filler. With the lamination, it's more 1708 biax fiberglass. I used 4 layers plus 3 more in the radius. And this is mostly for impact resistance. This will later be filled with something to fill this space that's inside it. Last night we laminated these. This is like the first lamination of the transom extension. And so I'm just gonna, it seemed like it cured pretty well, so I'm just gonna take off this little bit of the form, see how it looks.
So how's it look?
It looks great. I'm sure this is very hard to visualize, but so this was the most apt part of the hull. The hull shape now is, or the shape of the transom is curved, and what I have to do is make it flat. And so the new transom will start at these corners and go up from there. And so you'll see as this kind of progresses, but this is just the very beginning, making the transom we want on the boat. So all this has to be filled in. Like it was such a small space between my form and the actual face of this that I couldn't get anything in there. So I'm going to have to I do what's called potting this and probably fill it in with some fiberglass and stuff, but I promise that it will be like very flat when it's all done. You can see that what I did was I was able to match the shape of the hole to this, or I matched this to the shape of the hole. And it's in the shape of this little triangle that's filling in this gap to make this transom flat. And so what I'm going to be doing is filling in this triangle where the hole, or where the transom is cut off, so it's just like 1,000 times bigger than this little thing. Maybe not 1,000, like 100 times bigger. But it's exactly the same process of using a form to match the shape of the hole and then fiberglassing to the inside of it. That small transom face is a lot easier to match the hole than it will be to match the hole of the larger sections that I'm going to have to build to make the cockpit bigger. I'm using the lines drawing to find the shape at 3 locations. There will be 2 bulkheads and the transom face. And I'm using those 2 bulkhead sections. I'm actually going to use the female section of the bulkhead to...
Wait, bulkheads have genders?
It's like the inverse of a bulkhead. So it's the outside of the boat as opposed to the inside of the boat. So it's the outside shape as opposed to the inside shape. It's like the inverse of the bulkhead. And so I'm going to use those inverses at those sections in the boat to build a mold that will take the shape of the hull that I'm trying to build. Initially, I tried to draw these out from the lines drawing itself, which proved to be too inaccurate, as the lines drawing is pretty small for what I'm doing. Last week, we highlighted Marie and Alex's work to draw the hull from those lines drawings. And this is where those renderings become an important tool for me. I drew bulkheads at those 2 sections and used the inverses of those sections to find the curves I needed. It would be nice to have a CNC machine to cut these out, but I was able to get enough dimensions to just cut them out by hand. I'm going to trace the shape of the hull. This is the position on the hull where the most forward bulkhead will be, and so I've used my CAD model on here to find the shape of the hull, and then I've kind of made a bunch of stations that I can measure out. And hopefully, after I trace this and cut it out, hopefully I can put this up to the boat at that position and it will match the hull. And then I will use this to make the form for the extension. The form looked like it would match the hull shape, but I had to figure out a way to hold it in exactly the right position in space. So I had to build a jig that would be perfectly square to the boat and could hold these forms in position. I drew center lines and bulkhead lines in the cockpit and then built a jig out of 2x4s. I screwed the jig to the deck and the bulkhead forms were then screwed to the jig itself. Voila, the forms fit perfectly. So I had to figure out how to remove the jig without disturbing the placement of the forms. I attached the forms to a table cleated them to the boat, and built legs to hold them up. And then I removed the jig.
We hope you enjoyed this video. By liking this video and subscribing to our channel, you are actually helping us in a small way bring Duracell back to life. We have some new patrons to thank this week. First, thank you, Lewis, who is a cattle rancher in South Africa and is about to learn how to sail.
And thank you to Steve from Salt Lake City. He's a lifelong sailor and tinkerer and a big fan of Dash Shoes yacht designs like I am.
Thank you to Jay. He lives on this trawler with his wife in San Diego. They spent 3 years refitting it, and now they are making plans to sail or to head north. And we certainly hope that you stop by Port Townsend to say hello.
And thanks to Chris, who, like Mike Plant, grew up sailing on Lake Michigan and also fixed up this Hunter sailboat. And then also thank you to JC. He's a new friend of mine who's from the area, and him and his partner have this gorgeous Creola 40 that they've been fixing up, and they have lots of plans to cruise both north and south. So, and lastly, thank you to, oh no, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy, who's in the UK. He recently retired as an electrician, but he lived for many years in a small town in Cornwall. It was a very boaty town, and that's where he got interested in boats and sailing.
And lastly, thank you to Andre, Paul, Kenneth, Ono, and Martin. We didn't hear back from them, but we really appreciate your support. And if you're interested in joining the community, the Patreon community, you can find our page at the Duracell Project on patreon.com. So thank you again for watching.
And I have a fun fact. Matt knit this sweater that I'm wearing for me for Christmas a few years ago, and I just wanted to show it off because I love it.
See you next time.